Magick, magician, patterns, intelligence, genius. Whether you want to call yourself a magician or a magus or whatever the term is, a spiritual scientist, the label itself doesn't matter. At least for what I do, the closest term would actually be sorcerer, which comes from a root word that means encircler, one who circles themselves. And at first glance of the word, one would likely conjure up images of a magician casting a circle around himself to summon demons. And while on the outside that may be true, to the external general public that may be true, but there's an inner meaning and an inner pattern to that. See, the thing about circles is that they represent cycles. And what a cycle is a repeating pattern. The thing about cycles is that as they go through time, they come back to a starting point and repeat the process, cycle, circle. So for what I do, it would be closer to the word sorcerer, because I study the cycles and the patterns, not just of the stars and of time, but of all nature. And the thing that separates me and people like me from the rest of the general public is that we all have capacity for intelligence. We all do. But what limits our capacity for intelligence is what we actually place in that capacity. So I've been able to deduce that there's a relationship between content and context. A context sets the frame. The content fills that frame with substance. And it's through the study of that substance we can start to see the bigger picture, which is the context. For example, there's a thing called sports. And what a sport generally is a competition between two individuals or more with a solid objective. And only one person can score enough points with that objective to win. Now, whether the context fits the content of basketball or football or soccer or badminton or even Fortnite, the context is the same. It's the content which differs. And if you study the context, you'll be able to extrapolate what you learn and apply it to any piece of content that fits the context. So in this case, being able to study the context of a situation and understand that as the primary importance, that's what separates people like me from people who are not like me. So to be a sorcerer is one who understands the cycles. Now here's the deep science of this. When you begin to study a pattern and you study the content of a pattern, you can zoom out and find a different pattern that may or may not be similar. And once you learn the context of two patterns, you can start to see the similarities. And if you continue on this process, this will inevitably lead to an expansion of the intellect. This will inevitably lead to an expansion of the capacity to understand. What I mean by that is, you might learn the patterns inherent in sports. Then you might learn the patterns inherent in trading on the stock market. Then you might learn about the patterns of dating, male and female interaction. And the more different types of patterns that you study, you'll begin to see that there's actually patterns in between these patterns. There's a similarity between sports and dating. There's a similarity between the stock market and a pregnancy trimester. You'll start to see that there are patterns that are underlaying other patterns. Now, when this synthesis of understanding starts to really take place, the process becomes sublimated, automatic, subconscious, and you start to notice things without actively thinking about them. Because this information gets absorbed into the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind begins to update its pattern recognition system. So again, I say, this type of study inevitably leads one to become increasingly more and more intelligent. So, have you been able to pinpoint the difference between content and context? And if so, are you able to understand the similarities between unrelated contexts? We learn that magic isn't so much about spooky demons and magical spells, but about patterns.